The first time my wife asked me to sign the $50 million loan, she placed her hand over mine and said, "Mason, it's only paperwork." I believed her. 18 months later, the bank took my house, my investment accounts, and the commercial property my father had spent 30 years building. My wife kept her company. Her secretary kept his job. And I kept the debt. 6 months after that, I died on a rain-slick highway outside Boston with a foreclosure notice on the passenger seat. Then I opened my eyes. And the same silver pen was lying in front of me. "Mason?" My wife's voice pulled me back. "Did you hear me?" I looked across the conference table. Vivian Langford. My wife of 8 years. Founder and CEO of Halcyon Therapeutics, a rapidly growing medical device company based in Cambridge. She wore the same cream suit I remembered. The same diamond earrings. The same expression of controlled impatience. To her right sat her executive secretary, Elliot Mercer. 34. Perfect haircut. Perfect tie. Perfect posture. And, if my first life had taught me anything, a man who had been sleeping with my wife for at least 9 months. He was holding the same blue loan folder. The same one that ruined me. For several seconds, I could not breathe. The conference room. The view of the Charles River. The glass pitcher of water. The silver pen. Even the faint clicking from the HVAC vent. Everything was exactly the same. I lowered my eyes to the first page. $50 million senior secured credit facility. Borrower. Halcyon Therapeutics Incorporated. Lender. Breyer Federal Commercial Bank. Then the document beneath it. The one they had told me barely mattered. Limited personal guarantee and collateral support agreement. My name was already typed beneath the signature line. Mason Reed. I stopped breathing. In my first life, I had signed at 10:17 that morning. Today, the wall clock showed 10:11. 6 minutes. 6 minutes before I made the worst financial decision of my life. Vivian tapped one fingernail against the table. "Mason." I looked up. "The bank team is waiting downstairs." "I know." "Then sign." Elliot smiled politely. "Mr. Reed, counsel has already reviewed the package. The guarantee burns off once Halcyon meets the leverage covenant for 4 consecutive quarters." The exact sentence. Word for word. I remembered it because 18 months later, Elliot sat across from investigators and claimed he had never discussed my guarantee with me. In the first life, I believed the language meant my exposure was temporary. What nobody emphasized was the clause 3 pages later. The burn-off did not occur if the company suffered a covenant breach, material misrepresentation, unauthorized affiliate transfer, or certain specified defaults before the 4-quarter period ended. Halcyon eventually triggered 3 of them. And one transfer, $8.6 million routed through a strategic advisory arrangement, had been approved by Elliot. Vivian knew. Maybe not at first. But by the time the bank demanded payment from me, she knew enough. She still told me. "The company needs me. You can recover." I lost everything. She retained control. Elliot became chief operating officer. And I spent the final months of my first life learning that the phrase limited guarantee could still destroy a man if the limit was larger than everything he owned. Vivian leaned closer. "Mason, what's wrong?" I picked up the pen. Elliot relaxed. So did she. Then I placed it directly in front of him. "Elliot can sign." The room went silent. Vivian blinked. "What?" I pushed the guarantee across the table. "You said this is routine." Elliot's smile disappeared. Vivian stared at me. "Mason, stop joking." "I'm not." She glanced at the door as if someone might overhear. "This facility has been negotiated for 3 months." "I know. The acquisition closes Friday." "I know. Then why are you doing this now?" "Good question. In my first life, I had spent 18 months asking why everyone else had done what they did. This time, I only needed to explain my own choice. I'm not guaranteeing Halcyon's debt." Vivian's expression hardened. "It isn't Halcyon's debt." I looked at the cover page. "It literally is." "You know what I mean." "No. I know exactly what the document means." That was different. Her eyes narrowed. "You met with our lawyers." "I sat in a room while your lawyers explained the company's financing. They explained the guarantee. They said the exposure would be temporary if Halcyon met its covenants." "Yes. And if Halcyon doesn't?" She paused. "Barely. But I saw it. In my first life, I had missed that pause. Today it sounded like an alarm. Elliot stepped in. The operating plan has significant cushion. I turned to him. Then sign. He stopped. Vivian's face changed. Mason. What? Elliot is an employee. An important one, according to you. That has nothing to do with this. Really? I leaned back. For 6 months, every time I questioned this acquisition, you told me Elliot had modeled the cash flows. Vivian was silent. When I asked about integration risk, you said Elliot had personally coordinated it. Still nothing. When I asked why Halcyon needed $50 million instead of 28, you said Elliot had negotiated the expansion plan. I looked at him. So if he believes in the numbers enough to ask me to put my assets behind them, he can put his behind them too. Elliot's expression tightened. That's not how commercial lending works. He was right. Which was exactly why I had chosen my words carefully. I didn't say Breyer has to accept him instead of me. I tapped the agreement. I said I'm not signing. Vivian stood. Not dramatically. Vivian never needed drama to control a room. She simply became colder. We need 5 minutes. Elliot understood immediately. He gathered the blue folder. I put my hand on it. Leave that. His fingers froze. Vivian looked at me. Why? Because my name is on it. It's Halcyon's document. The guarantee is mine. Neither of them liked that distinction. Elliot let go. Then left. The door closed. Vivian waited 2 seconds. What the hell are you doing? There was my wife. Not the CEO. Not the polished woman investors adored. The one who became angry whenever my boundaries interrupted her plans. I'm declining a guarantee. You promised me. No. Her eyes flashed. You did. I said I would review it. Mason, don't play word games. I'm not. She walked toward the window, then turned. The bank increased the facility because of your support. That sounds like their problem. It becomes my problem. Yes. And mine. No. She stared. That is the point. In my first life, I had thought Vivian needed me. Not emotionally. Financially. My family owned a portfolio of industrial and medical office properties through Reed Capital Partners, the company my father created before he died. I was not a billionaire. Not a hidden heir. Nothing ridiculous. But my net worth was substantial, conservative, and liquid enough that Breyer Federal liked having me behind a risky growth stage borrower. Halcyon had valuable technology. It also had unstable cash flow. The bank wanted additional support. Vivian refused to pledge more of her voting stock because she said losing control would damage the company. So she asked me to guarantee part of the facility instead. Marriage, she said. Partnership. Shared future. The bank's maximum claim under my guarantee was $22 million plus enforcement costs. I had read the number. I had signed anyway. Because Vivian told me the probability of collection was nearly zero. What I did not know then was that before this meeting, Elliot had already prepared internal models showing Halcyon would likely breach the leverage covenant if the acquisition missed its first 2 quarterly targets. I discovered those models after the bank sued me. By then, Elliot claimed they were early drafts. Vivian claimed she had never relied on them. Everyone remembered just enough to survive. Except me. I had signed. The signature was enough. Vivian returned to the table. Is this because of the argument last night? I almost laughed. Last night. I had forgotten. In this life, yesterday evening I had asked why Elliot joined us for dinner after a board presentation. Vivian had called me insecure. Elliot had smiled and said he understood how demanding Vivian's schedule could be, from the inside. I did not know about the affair yet. Not in this timeline. Not officially. So I kept it out of my answer. This is about $22 million of personal exposure. You can cover it. There it was. Same sentence. Not exactly the same words as my first life. Same belief. You can survive it. I looked at her. That doesn't mean I should. Her expression hardened. You know what this acquisition means to me. Yes. Then why would you sabotage it? I'm not. If the bank pulls the facility, the acquisition dies. Then Halcyon needs different financing. We don't have time. That doesn't create an obligation for me. She laughed once. Cold. You're my husband. Yes. We built this together. No. That stopped her. What? Halcyon is yours. I pointed toward the conference room around us. You founded it. You control the board. You chose the acquisition. You chose the financing structure. You chose to preserve your voting shares rather than pledge more equity. Her face slowly changed. Those were not accusations. They were facts. I continued. You can't make every decision alone and then call the downside ours when you need my balance sheet. Silence. For the first time that morning, Vivian had no immediate response. Then she said quietly, "So this is punishment?" "No. What else would you call it?" "A boundary." She almost looked offended by the word. At 10:19, there was a knock. The bank's relationship manager, Rachel Sloan, entered with outside counsel. She looked surprised that nothing had been signed. "Everything all right?" Vivian smiled instantly. Professional again. "Mason has a few final questions." I looked at Rachel. "No. I've made a decision." Rachel's eyes moved between us. "Regarding?" "I will not execute the personal guarantee." The room changed. Not panic. Calculation. Commercial bankers were good at that. Rachel sat down. "Understood." Vivian turned sharply. "Rachel, give us another minute." Rachel did not move. "With respect, if Mr. Reed has declined, we should discuss what that means for the facility." I liked her immediately. No emotional drama. Just consequences. Vivian said, "The company is still fully committed." Rachel nodded. "But the approved credit terms included Mr. Reed's guarantee. Can the structure be modified?" "Possibly." There it was. Not impossible. Not catastrophe. A financing problem. The kind a CEO was paid to solve. Rachel opened her folder. Alternatives could include additional equity support, a reduced commitment, increased pricing, additional collateral, or another acceptable guarantor. I glanced toward the door. Then at Vivian. Elliot believes strongly in the acquisition. Her eyes cut toward me. Rachel looked confused. "Mr. Mercer?" "Vivian's executive secretary." I kept my voice neutral. "He has been closely involved in the transaction. If another guarantor is acceptable, perhaps he'd like to discuss it." Rachel remained perfectly professional. A guarantor would need sufficient financial capacity and bank approval. Of course. Elliot almost certainly did not. That was not the point. The point was simple. People found risk easy to recommend when someone else carried it. Vivian understood exactly what I was doing. Her voice dropped. "This is childish." I looked at her. "Then don't ask him." The meeting ended without my signature. At 10:52, I left Halcyon headquarters. In my first life, I had walked out of that building relieved. Proud. I thought I had helped my wife secure her future. Today, I walked out carrying my unsigned guarantee. The air felt different. Maybe because I knew what one signature could cost. I called Julia Merrick, my longtime attorney at Reed Capital. She answered on the second ring. "Mason? I need you to review all exposure between me, Reed Capital, Vivian, and Halcyon." A pause. "That's broad." "It needs to be." "Did something happen?" "I declined the Halcyon guarantee." Longer pause. "Good." I stopped walking. "What?" Julia exhaled. "I was going to call you this afternoon." My skin went cold. "Why?" "Because Halcyon's counsel sent a revised collateral schedule last night. I remembered none of this from the first life." "What changed?" "Someone added language referencing a possible pledge of Reed Capital distributions." My grip tightened around the phone. "I never approved that." "I know. Who requested it?" "I'm still tracing the markup." I stood on the sidewalk as traffic moved around me. Then Julia said, "Mason, there's something else." "What?" "An email from Halcyon's finance office says your guarantee was already confirmed by sponsor yesterday." My breathing slowed. "Yesterday?" "Yes. I didn't confirm anything. I assumed that was the problem." "Who sent the email?" She paused. "Elliot Mercer." For a moment, the city disappeared. Not because I was surprised. Because suddenly I understood. In my first life, I had thought the $50 million loan became dangerous after I signed it. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe the trap had started before the pen ever reached my hand. "Forward everything to me." "I will." "And Julia?" "Yes?" "Preserve the original metadata." Her tone changed. "You think someone misrepresented your approval?" "I think I want to know exactly what Elliot told the bank before I ever agreed to anything." I ended the call. Across the street, Halcyon's glass tower reflected the morning light. Somewhere upstairs, Vivian was probably furious. Elliot was probably trying to repair the financing. The acquisition was still alive. The loan was still negotiable. Nothing had collapsed. Yet. That mattered. Because this time I was not going to destroy my wife's company just to prove I had been right in another life. I did not need to. I only needed one thing. For every person to sign for the risk they actually chose. Vivian wanted the acquisition. Elliot designed it. Halcyon borrowed the money. And for the first time across 2 lives, my name was not going underneath their debt. By noon, Julia had forwarded me 17 emails. I read them in a conference room at Reed Capital with the door locked. The first 12 were boring. Draft covenants. Collateral schedules. Insurance certificates. Closing checklists. Then I reached Elliot's message. Sent Sunday night at 9:14. To Rachel Sloan at Briar Federal. Copied to Halcyon's outside counsel and chief financial officer. Subject. Sponsor support confirmation. The body was 3 sentences. Rachel. Mason has confirmed he is comfortable proceeding with the agreed guarantee structure and collateral support. We expect execution Monday morning without substantive changes. Elliot. I read it twice. Then a third time. Sunday night. At 9:14, I had been sitting in my kitchen with Vivian. We were eating takeout because she came home late. She asked whether I was still coming to Halcyon Monday morning. I said yes. That was all. No discussion of final collateral language. No confirmation. No promise to sign without changes. Yet Elliot had told the bank I had already agreed. Julia sat across from me. Do you remember authorizing him to send this? No. Any text? Call? Verbal approval? No. Did Vivian tell him you had agreed? I don't know. That was important. I was not going to turn assumptions into facts just because I knew how my first life ended. Julia nodded. Then we document that. She opened a clean legal pad. Today's rule is simple. What? You do not accuse anyone of fraud until we know whether this was deliberate misrepresentation, sloppy transaction management, or somebody repeating what they thought Vivian told them. I leaned back. You think it could be innocent? I think lawyers who decide the answer before reviewing evidence become expensive storytellers. Mara Keene would have liked her. Different life. Same lesson. Facts first. I pointed to the collateral schedule. What about Reed Capital distributions? Julia pulled up the red line. The previous version said my obligations were limited to specified personally held investment accounts and certain commercial real estate interests. The revised draft added, including distributions, proceeds, and other economic benefits receivable by guarantor from affiliated investment entities. That language is broad, Julia said. Broad enough to reach Reed Capital? Possibly distributions payable to you. Not the company's underlying assets automatically. But it increases exposure. Yes. Who added it? The document metadata shows the revision came from Halcyon outside counsel. At whose request? Still checking. I looked at the email chain. Elliot again. He had circulated the revised collateral schedule at 8:42 Sunday night. 32 minutes before telling Briar I had confirmed it. Julia. Yes? If I had signed yesterday's version, would I have been guaranteeing more than the structure I was originally shown? Potentially. That was enough to make my stomach tighten. In the first life, after everything collapsed, I remembered arguing about how the bank reached certain distributions I thought were outside the guarantee. I had assumed I misunderstood the documents. Maybe I did. But now I was seeing how late the language changed. And nobody had highlighted it for me. That did not make the document invalid. My signature would still have mattered. Which was precisely why I had refused to give it. At 12:37, Vivian called. I let it ring once. Then answered. Mason. Her voice was controlled again. We need to talk. About the revised collateral schedule? Silence. That was useful. How do you know about that? Julia received it. You were always going to receive it. When? At closing. I almost laughed. At closing? It's a normal revision. Then why wasn't it mentioned this morning? Mason, please don't turn every markup into a conspiracy. There it was. The word I had not used. Conspiracy. I asked a question. And I'm answering it. No. You're telling me how to feel about it. Silence. Then her tone softened. The bank is willing to restructure. Good. But it will be more expensive. That's Halcyon's financing cost. We're married. That hasn't changed the borrower. Her patience cracked. You keep saying that as though I'm some stranger asking you for money. No. You're my wife asking me to guarantee a corporate loan. That company supports our life. I looked around Reed Capital's conference room. No. A pause. Our life existed before Halcyon made $1. She did not answer. Because that was true. I had funded our first apartment. Our first house. Her early research. 2 years of salaries when Halcyon was burning cash. I never resented that. What I resented now was the assumption that past support created permanent access to future risk. Vivian said. Rachel gave us 4 alternatives. I heard. How? Julia spoke with bank counsel. Another silence. Good. No information channel controlled entirely by Vivian anymore. She'll accept a larger equity pledge from me, Vivian said. That sounds reasonable. And additional support from management. I waited. Elliot volunteered. There it was. I sat straighter. For what? A limited personal guarantee. I nearly laughed. Not because it was funny. Because 24 hours earlier, Elliot had explained why executives like him did not personally guarantee commercial debt. What changed? He wants to save the acquisition. Of course he did. How much? Vivian hesitated. That answer told me it was not 22 million. 5 million? Yes. And you? I would pledge additional Halcyon shares and subordinate part of my founder distributions. That was dramatically different from the original structure. The company would carry more of its own financing risk. Vivian would put more of her own economic interest behind the acquisition. Elliot would have actual skin in the game. The revised facility might cost more. But the person who benefited from control would finally bear more of the downside. I said. Sounds more aligned. Vivian's silence became cold. You're enjoying this. No. You wanted him to sign. I suggested that people who believe in the deal should share the risk. You humiliated him in front of the bank. He told the bank I had already confirmed my guarantee before I did. That stopped her. What? I waited. You didn't know? What are you talking about? I read the email aloud. Slowly. When I finished, there was silence. Then Vivian said. He probably assumed. Based on what? I don't know. Did you tell him I had agreed? No. The answer came fast. Could be true. Could be self-protective. I did not decide. Then he represented something to the bank that neither of us authorized. Vivian exhaled. I'll talk to him. Good. Mason. Yes? Please don't contact the bank directly about that email yet. My expression changed. Why? Because we're renegotiating. There it was. Protect the closing first. Understand the truth later. The first life had been built on that ordering. I would not repeat it. I won't make accusations. She relaxed slightly. But Julia will correct the record. Mason. The bank needs to know I had not confirmed the guarantee Sunday night. You could derail the facility. If one factual correction derails a $50 million loan, the loan has a bigger problem. She said nothing. I ended the call. At 1:18, Julia sent the correction. Short. Clinical. No accusations. For clarity, Mason Reed had not approved or confirmed the proposed guarantee or collateral structure as of Sunday evening. Any communication indicating otherwise was not authorized by Mr. Reed. Rachel replied 9 minutes later. Received. Thank you. That was it. No explosion. No police. No dramatic cancellation. Just a record. But records mattered. Especially before signatures. At 3, Breyer Federal held a revised financing meeting. I was not required to attend. I went anyway. Not as guarantor. As Vivian's husband and a Reed Capital principal whose interests had been referenced in earlier drafts. Julia came with me. This time, no one placed a pen in front of me. That felt better than it should have. Rachel sat at one end of the table. Halcyon's CFO, Daniel Cho, sat beside Vivian. Elliot was on her other side. He looked less confident than yesterday. The revised structure was displayed on a screen. 50 million total commitment remained. But Breyer would now advance only 42 million at closing. The final 8 million would become available after Halcyon satisfied specified post-closing milestones. Vivian would pledge additional founder shares under a negotiated control arrangement. Halcyon would grant the bank a stronger security interest over certain acquisition assets. And Elliot Mercer would execute a $5 million limited guarantee. Not because his personal assets alone made the loan safe. They did not. Rachel said that plainly. But he had disclosed significant investment holdings, deferred compensation, and, something I had never known, a substantial family trust interest that made the guarantee meaningful enough as additional support. $5 million. The number was still far below my original $22 million cap. But the principle had changed. He was no longer standing beside Vivian explaining why the risk was safe for me. His name was now in the package. Rachel turned toward him. Mr. Mercer, your counsel reviewed the guarantee? Yes. Do you understand it is a personal obligation and not merely an officer certification? His jaw tightened. Yes. Do you understand that certain company defaults could prevent the scheduled release? Yes. The exact questions no one had forced me to confront so directly in my first life. Maybe Breyer had asked. Maybe I simply heard what I wanted to hear. That realization mattered too. I could not blame everyone else for the old Mason's willingness to sign. I had made the decision. Love had influenced it. Pressure had influenced it. Bad disclosure may have influenced it. But the signature was mine. That was why this life had to be different. Rachel pushed the document toward Elliot. A black pen rested beside it. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then I saw something I recognized. Fear. Not panic. Calculation. Elliot looked at Vivian. She gave him the smallest nod. He picked up the pen. I said nothing. This was not my victory. If he did not want the risk, he could refuse. Just as I had. His lawyer leaned over and whispered something. Elliot reread the signature page. Then signed. Elliot Mercer. I watched the ink dry. The title promise of my second life arrived without applause. No one gasped. No one understood what the moment meant to me. But I did. Yesterday, that table had been arranged so I would carry the most dangerous personal obligation. Today, the man who had told everyone the transaction was safe had finally put his own name beneath part of it. Rachel gathered the documents. Vivian looked at me. There was no gratitude in her expression. Only anger. And something else. Concern. Not about me. About Elliot. That told me more than I wanted. When the meeting ended, Elliot stopped me in the hall. Happy? Julia slowed beside me. I looked at him. About what? You got what you wanted. No. He laughed bitterly. You practically dared me to sign. I said I wasn't signing. You knew Vivian would come to me. Interesting. Not. The bank. Not. The board. Vivian. You could have refused. His face hardened. She needed the financing. So did you. What's that supposed to mean? I looked at him. You've spent months telling everyone this acquisition is essential. It is. Then 5 million says you believe yourself. He stepped closer. Julia moved slightly, not between us, just enough to remind him I was not alone. Elliot lowered his voice. You don't understand, Halcyon. Maybe. You're just the husband with money. There it was. The contempt I had missed the first time. I smiled faintly. Then you shouldn't have needed my signature. His face changed. I walked away. At 6:40 that evening, Daniel Cho called me. Halcyon's CFO had never called me privately before. Mason. Daniel. Can we speak confidentially? That depends on the subject. Then let me phrase it differently. He sounded nervous. I think you should ask your lawyer to contact me. My expression hardened. Why? A pause. Because today's guarantee amendment forced us to reopen the acquisition financing model. I waited. And? We found something. What? The board model Elliot presented is not the model finance originally prepared. My hand tightened around the phone. How different? The revenue assumptions are higher. How much? Enough that the covenant cushion changes materially. The first life flashed through me. The internal model. The breach. Elliot later calling it an early draft. I kept my voice steady. Does Vivian know? Not yet. Why call me? Another pause. Because your original guarantee was sized using Elliot's version. There it was. The loan. The false confirmation. The late collateral language. And now a second financial model. I looked out over Boston. Daniel. Yes? Don't send anything to my personal email. He went quiet. Have your counsel contact Julia Merrick. You think this is that serious? I think documents involving $50 million deserve clean handling. After a moment, he said. Agreed. We ended the call. I stood alone for several minutes. In my first life, I thought the disaster began when Halcyon failed. This time, I was beginning to see something more dangerous. Maybe the collapse had not started after the loan closed. Maybe the numbers had already been bent before anyone signed. And now Elliot Mercer's name was sitting on the same financing package he had spent months building. This time, if the assumptions were false, he would not be explaining them from behind my signature. He would be explaining them from behind his own. Daniel Cho did not send me the model. He did something better. He had Halcyon's outside counsel send it to Julia. That mattered. By 9 the next morning, I was sitting in Julia's office with two versions of the same acquisition forecast projected on the wall. One labeled Finance Base Case, Rev. 7. The other, Board Presentation Case, Final. At first glance, they looked almost identical. Same acquisition target. Same debt structure. Same integration schedule. Same 5-year revenue chart. Then Julia zoomed in. Look at year 1. I did. Finance Base Case projected $31.4 million in acquired revenue. Board Case projected $38.9 million. $7.5 million higher, I said. Yes. Why? Julia changed slides. New distributor assumptions. Approved by finance? No. Customer contracts? Not yet. Signed letters? Some. Binding? Mostly no. I stared at the numbers. What else changed? She moved to the cost section. Integration expenses in the original finance model. $11.8 million. Board model. $7.1 million. Almost $5 million disappeared. How? Several expenses were reclassified as deferred implementation costs. Can they be? Accounting treatment is a question for Halcyon's auditors. But for the financing model, moving them out improves near-term covenant performance. Of course it did. Lower costs. Higher revenue. More cushion. The loan looked safer. Then Julia showed me the debt service schedule. The original model predicted Halcyon would come dangerously close to its leverage covenant in Q3 if acquisition revenue missed plan by even 10%. The board version claimed the company could absorb a 22% miss. That was not an optimistic tweak. That was a different story. I leaned back. Who changed it? Daniel says finance did not. Then who? He says the metadata shows the final board version was edited through Elliot's executive account. There it was. Not enough to prove fraud. Enough to ask questions. Vivian? Still unclear. Was she sent both models? Yes. My chest tightened. That mattered more than I wanted it to. Did she open them? Julia looked at me. We know both were delivered. We do not know what she reviewed, what was explained orally, or whether she understood the differences. Again. Facts first. I nodded. What did Daniel say? He wants the audit committee involved. Good. And he wants to know whether you will participate. No. Julia raised an eyebrow. No? I'm not a Halcyon director. You're also not neutral anymore. Exactly. I looked at the two models. If I start leading their investigation, Vivian will call this revenge. Fair. Let their board do its job. Julia nodded. That is the right answer. For once, I did not feel any need to control what happened next. That was new. In my first life, I had spent months trying to drag people toward the truth. Now I understood something. The truth was stronger when other people found it themselves. Vivian came home at 11:40 that night. I was in the kitchen. Not waiting for her. I had actually forgotten she would be home. That bothered her. I could tell. She stopped in the doorway. You didn't answer my texts. I was working. So was I. I looked up. She still had her coat on. Her face was tired. Not angry yet. Tough day? She laughed once. You know exactly what kind of day I had. I closed my laptop. The audit committee? Her expression changed. So you know. Daniel contacted counsel. Of course he did. The bitterness in her voice was not subtle. He was right to. You think so? Yes. She put her bag on the counter. The board is reviewing two versions of the acquisition model because you refused to sign a guarantee. No. I shook my head. They're reviewing two versions because two versions exist. Her jaw tightened. If you had signed, none of this would be happening. There it was. I stared at her. Then I said, "That might be the most important sentence you've said all week." She looked confused. What? If I had signed, nobody would be looking. Silence. That's what bothers you? No. It should. Mason. No. My voice stayed calm. You keep talking about my refusal like it caused the problem. I pointed toward her phone. But if a routine financing change exposed two conflicting models, then the problem was already there. She looked away. That was worse than anger. Did you know about the differences? I knew there were different scenarios. That's not what I asked. Her eyes came back to mine. I'm CEO. There are always multiple scenarios. Did you know the board version used higher revenue and lower integration cost than finance's base case? She paused. 1 second. 2. I knew Elliot adjusted assumptions. There. My stomach tightened. How much? I don't remember. Did Daniel agree? No. That answer came quieter. I stood. Then why was the board given Elliot's version? Vivian's expression hardened. Because Daniel is conservative. Good CFOs usually are. He was slowing the acquisition. So you went around him? No. We used a management case. That sounds better. It is different. Was it labeled management case? Silence. I already knew. No. The board deck said final. No scenario label. No warning. No side-by-side comparison. Just numbers. Vivian said. The board understood the assumptions were aggressive. Did the bank? She stopped. That was the question. Not whether Vivian's board could tolerate optimism. Whether Breyer Federal sized a $50 million facility using assumptions it believed represented Halcyon's best current forecast. I don't know. Elliot told them the model had management approval. It did. Did you approve it? Yes. There it was. The first clean admission that changed my understanding. Elliot had edited the numbers. Vivian had approved the version. That did not prove she intended to deceive anyone. But she was not some CEO being misled by her secretary. She had chosen the optimistic case. I looked at her. Why? Her eyes flashed. Because the acquisition matters. That's not an answer. It is. No. That explains motive. I paused. Not judgment. She laughed bitterly. You sound like a prosecutor. No. I shook my head. I sound like someone who almost put $22 million behind those numbers. For the first time, she had no response. The audit committee met the next morning. I did not attend. Vivian did. Elliot did. Daniel did. 3 outside directors did. By noon, Halcyon placed a temporary hold on the final $8 million delayed draw under the new loan structure. The initial $42 million had already closed. The acquisition was moving forward. But the remaining capital would not be released until the board resolved questions around the forecasts and internal approvals. No collapse. No bankruptcy. Just friction. That was how serious business problems usually started. Small delays. Additional questions. People rereading things they had rushed through before. At 1:06, Vivian called. I need you to come to Halcyon. No. Mason. I'm not on the audit committee. They want to ask about your guarantee discussions. That changed things. Who wants to? Outside counsel. Have them contact Julia. They did. Good. Then I'll come if she advises it. Vivian exhaled sharply. Can we do one thing without lawyers? No. Silence. Then. You really don't trust me anymore. I thought about the first life. Her sitting across from me while the bank enforced the guarantee. Her saying, I didn't know the model was wrong. Her choosing Halcyon over the assets tied to my family. Her allowing me to believe Elliot acted independently. Then I came back to the present. Here. This life. Facts. I trust documentation. That hurt her. I heard it. But I did not soften it. The interview took place at 4. Julia sat beside me. Across the table were 2 attorneys from Halcyon's audit council. No Vivian. No Elliot. That was appropriate. They asked how the guarantee had been presented to me. Who attended discussions. What I understood about covenant risk. What forecasts I had seen. That last question mattered. I had seen the board case. Never the finance base case. Did anyone tell you Daniel Cho had prepared a more conservative model? No. Did anyone provide sensitivity analysis showing the company approaching covenant limits under lower revenue assumptions? No. Who primarily discussed the financing with you? Vivian and Elliot. Together? Usually. Who described the guarantee as temporary? Elliot used the phrase. Vivian agreed with him. Did either tell you the release depended on avoiding specified defaults? The legal documents did. Did they emphasize that? No. Again. Not illegal necessarily. But relevant. Then one attorney asked. Why did you refuse to sign Monday? I could not say. Because I died last time. So I gave the answer this life supported. The final collateral language changed late, and I was no longer comfortable with the concentration of personal exposure. Anything else? Yes. What? I realized I was being asked to take more downside than the people managing the acquisition. The attorney wrote that down. Then. Did you suspect the financial model was inaccurate? No. That answer mattered. I had no current reason to suspect it before Daniel called. No manufactured prophecy. No pretending. The interview ended in 40 minutes. Clean. At 6, I was leaving when I saw Elliot outside Vivian's office. He looked terrible. Tie removed. Shirt sleeves rolled. Phone in one hand. He saw me. Immediately walked over. You talked to audit counsel. Yes. What did you tell them? The truth. He laughed. Convenient. I stopped. What does that mean? It means you get to sit outside the company and act clean while everyone else takes the risk. I looked at him. You signed $5 million. His expression darkened. Exactly. And? You wanted that. No. You said it. I said I wasn't signing. You kept pushing Vivian to make management take more exposure. I said risk should be aligned. He stepped closer. Well, congratulations. His voice dropped. Now the bank has frozen $8 million, the board is panicking, and my entire net worth is tied to a deal you've been trying to undermine. That sentence caught me. Your entire net worth? He hesitated. Too late. His guarantee was $5 million. But if $5 million represented nearly everything liquid he had, then he had taken far more personal risk than I thought. Why would you sign that? His face tightened. Because Vivian needed it. Not Halcyon. Vivian. Again. He realized the same moment I did. I said nothing. Neither did he. Then Vivian opened her office door. She saw us. Her eyes moved from Elliot to me. Mason. I looked at her. Then at him. The first life had already told me what their relationship became. This life still needed evidence. But the emotional geometry was becoming impossible to ignore. Elliot stepped away first. I'll send the revised customer schedule. Vivian nodded. He left. I watched him go. Then asked. Does he always sign away everything when you ask? Her expression changed. What? Nothing. Mason. I kept walking. She followed me into the hall. Stop doing that. Doing what? Insinuating things. I asked a question. You've been looking at him differently all week. I turned. How should I look at the man who told a bank I approved a guarantee before I did? He made a mistake. There it is again. What? Everyone around you keeps making mistakes that somehow land on someone else. Her face hardened. That's unfair. Maybe. I looked at her. So let's stop talking about fairness. The audit committee's preliminary findings arrived Friday morning. 3 conclusions. First. The board financing model materially differed from the finance base case. Second. The board deck did not clearly identify the changed assumptions or explain Daniel's objections. Third. Elliot had transmitted the board model to Breyer Federal as the company's approved forecast after Vivian authorized its use. That last part mattered. Vivian had not been bypassed. She approved it. The bank had relied on numbers management knew were materially more aggressive than finance's internal base case. Whether that became a legal issue depended on what was represented, what the bank understood, and whether the assumptions had reasonable support. Still unresolved. Then came the fourth point. Not a conclusion. A question. The audit committee had discovered a set of emails between Elliot and one of the acquisition target's largest distributors. The distributor had never committed to the revenue volume used in the board model. In fact, 10 days before the loan meeting, the distributor had written, We are not prepared to guarantee minimum purchase volumes for the first 12 months. Yet the board model treated nearly 60% of those projected orders as contracted or highly committed revenue. I stared at the email. This was different. Not aggressive optimism. Contradictory information. Julia called me 10 minutes later. You saw it? Yes. Do not draw conclusions yet. I know. Good. Who had the email? Elliot definitely. Vivian? Copied. My chest tightened again. This time harder. She received it? Yes. Did she open it? Unknown. Did the later board model still use the higher volume? Yes. Silence. The story was changing. Until now, I had believed Elliot manipulated the financing and Vivian trusted him because he was useful, and because, in another life, he became something more than useful. But the evidence was moving towards something more uncomfortable. Vivian may not have been deceived. She may have known the numbers were fragile and chosen them anyway because without them, the acquisition might not happen. That did not make Elliot innocent. It made the scheme less simple. This was not secretary manipulate CEO. It might be CEO and secretary choosing the same risk for different reasons. And in my first life, both of them had placed the largest personal downside on me. I looked at the unsigned guarantee copy Julia had kept. My name still typed beneath the blank line. Mason Reed. The first time, I thought the betrayal happened when Halcyon failed and Vivian chose the company over me. Now I understood the more important question. What had she already chosen before I signed? And this time, I was going to find out before the answer cost me everything. The email changed the tone of the audit. Not because it proved fraud by itself. It didn't. Companies used forecasts all the time. Management teams made assumptions. Deals were often built on expected growth rather than guaranteed contracts. But this was different for one reason. Halcyon's board model had treated projected distributor volume as highly committed revenue. The distributor's own email said the opposite. And Vivian had been copied. That meant the question was no longer only, did Elliot manipulate the model? It became, what did Vivian know when she approved it? I did not like that question. Not because I was afraid of the answer. Because I already knew what I wanted the answer to be. I wanted Elliot to be the problem. I wanted Vivian to have been arrogant, inattentive, maybe too trusting. That would still hurt. But it would leave a version of my wife I could understand. The alternative was worse. That she knew the loan was more dangerous than she admitted. And still put the guarantee in front of me. Julia called me into her office Monday morning. 2 folders waited on the table. One belonged to Reed Capital. The other came from Halcyon's audit counsel. What happened? I asked. They reconstructed the forecast review sequence. I sat down. How? Email metadata, document access logs, calendar records, and meeting notes. Vivian? Julia nodded. She attended a finance review 12 days before the board vote. With Daniel? And Elliot. What was discussed? Julia opened the first folder. Daniel chose notes were concise. 3 issues. The acquisition targets distributor concentration. Integration expense risk. And the effect of delayed revenue on Halcyon's leverage covenant. I read one line twice. If commercial ramp begins in Q3 rather than Q2, borrower may breach covenant under proposed debt load without additional equity. My chest tightened. Vivian saw this? The meeting notes say it was presented. Any dispute? No recorded dispute. And what happened after? 2 days later, Elliot circulated a revised model. The aggressive version. Higher revenue. Lower integration costs. More covenant cushion. I looked up. Did Vivian ask finance to approve the changes? No. Did Daniel refuse? He objected. There it was. Not quietly. Not after the fact. Before the bank ever saw the board model. Julia turned the page. Daniel had sent an email to Vivian and Elliot. I cannot support using the revised case as the company's base operating forecast without clearer disclosure of assumption changes. I stared at the screen. What did Vivian say? Julia slid another page toward me. Vivian replied 3 hours later. Understood. We will present the management case with supporting commercial context. I read it twice. Management case. Yes. But that isn't what the board deck called it. No. The deck said final. Yes. And the bank received it as the approved forecast. Yes. I leaned back. My stomach felt heavy. Vivian had known Daniel objected. She knew the revised case was not finance's base forecast. She still approved its use. Again, that did not automatically make it fraudulent. But it killed one excuse. She could not later say she had no idea there were competing assumptions. At noon, Halcyon's audit committee requested a second interview with Vivian. I knew because she texted me. They're treating me like I lied to the bank. I stared at the message. Then another arrived. Elliot says Daniel is trying to protect himself. Of course he did. Blame the CFO. The man who documented his objection before closing. I did not answer. 10 minutes later. Mason, please call me. I did. What do you want? She inhaled. You saw Daniel's notes. Yes. Then you know this is being twisted. How? The aggressive model was not fake. I didn't say it was. It was based on management's view of what the acquisition could produce. Then why did Daniel refuse to call it the base case? Because Daniel is conservative. That doesn't answer the labeling issue. She became irritated. You've never run a public company financing process. No. So stop pretending every imperfect deck is a crime. I haven't called it a crime. Silence. That mattered. She wanted me to overreach. Then she could dismiss me as emotional. I would not help her. I continued. I'm asking whether you knew the internal base case had lower revenue and higher costs. Yes. There it was again. Clearer now. And you still approved the board model. Yes. Why? Because I believed the acquisition could outperform Daniel's case. Believed based on what? Commercial conversations. Which ones? Customers. Distributors. Industry contacts. Binding commitments? No. So judgment. Yes. She sounded almost relieved. Like she had finally found the right word. Judgment. Not deception. Not concealment. Judgment. Maybe that was true. Then I asked the question that mattered to me personally. Why didn't you show me both cases before asking me to guarantee the loan? Silence. Long enough that I knew the answer would hurt. Mason. Why? You wouldn't have signed. There it was. No legal language. No corporate framing. Just truth. I closed my eyes. Say that again. You were already nervous about the acquisition. That's not what you said. She exhaled. If I had shown you Daniel's downside case, you would have focused on the worst scenario. Because I would have been personally liable in the worst scenario. We did not expect that scenario. But you knew it existed. Every deal has downside cases. Not every spouse asks the other to put $22 million behind one without showing it. She went quiet. My voice stayed calm. You didn't forget to tell me. No answer. You decided I didn't need to know. Still silence. Then. I decided you would misunderstand the risk. That hurt more. Because it sounded reasonable in her head. She had appointed herself judge of what information I could handle. The CEO deciding the husband might react emotionally. So better to simplify. Better to protect the deal. Better to get the signature first. I said. That isn't protection. I know how it sounds. It sounds exactly like what it was. Mason. You wanted informed consent only if the information produced the answer you wanted. She did not deny it. That was the moment something inside me settled. Not broke. Settled. The first life had been full of uncertainty. Maybe Vivian did not know. Maybe Elliot lied. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe the collapse surprised everyone. This life was becoming clearer. Vivian had not known every future consequence. Nobody had. But she knew the financing was riskier than she told me. And she chose not to show me the downside because she thought I might refuse. Then I did refuse. And everything surfaced. The audit committee suspended Elliot 2 days later. Not fired. Suspended. Pending review. His system access was restricted. His role in the acquisition integration was transferred to Daniel and another executive. Halcyon issued no public statement. The bank was informed only that the company was conducting an internal governance review. Again, no explosion. Process. That made Elliot angrier than a public firing would have. He called me that evening from a number I did not recognize. I answered because I thought it might be business. Mason. His voice. I almost hung up. Then stopped. What? You happy now? No. Vivian can barely function. That sounds like something you should discuss with her. You did this. There it was. I actually laughed. Quietly. What exactly did I do? You refused the guarantee. Yes. That forced the structure change. Yes. That triggered the model review. Correct. And now the board is acting like we tried to deceive everyone. I leaned back. Did you change the forecast assumptions? Yes. No hesitation. Did Daniel object? He objected to everything. That wasn't my question. Yes. Did you tell the bank I had confirmed my guarantee before I did? Silence. Then. I believed you had. Based on? Vivian said you were on board. Interesting. Vivian told me she did not authorize Elliot's Sunday confirmation. Not necessarily inconsistent. She said those exact words? She said you weren't going to let the deal fail. That was not the same thing. Elliot had converted emotional expectation into financial authorization. Again. People around Vivian kept hearing what helped them close the transaction. I asked. Did you know about Daniel's downside model? Yes. Did you show it to the bank? It was not the approved operating case. Did you show it to me? You weren't part of management. I was the guarantor. You were supposed to be there. Supposed to be. His voice carried resentment. Like my refusal violated the role already assigned to me. I said. That's the problem, Elliot. What? You all treated my signature as completed before I gave it. He went quiet. Then said. You don't understand what Vivian has sacrificed for Halcyon. I almost smiled. There it was again. Vivian. Not shareholders. Not patients. Not employees. Vivian. You care about her a lot. Silence. I did not push. Not yet. Present evidence. Current timeline. I had no need to force the affair into the open before it proved itself. Elliot said. She built everything. And? She deserves this acquisition. That's not how acquisitions work. You know what I mean. I do. I paused. That's what worries me. He hung up. On Thursday, Reed Capital's audit of my personal exposure produced something more concrete. Julia called at 7:20 a.m. Come in. What did you find? Something tied to the collateral language. I arrived 30 minutes later. She had printed the Sunday redline again. The clause referencing Reed Capital distributions had not originated from Breyer Federal. Not from Halcyon's outside counsel either. Counsel inserted it into the document. But the request came from Elliot. He had sent a note to the law firm Saturday afternoon. Vivian wants broader sponsor support reflected without reopening economics with Mason unless necessary. My eyes stopped on one phrase. Without reopening economics with Mason unless necessary. I read it aloud. Julia nodded. That is why counsel expanded the clause. Did Vivian actually say that? Unknown. Elliot attributes it to her. Yes. Any direct email from Vivian? No. I looked at the line again. In my first life, I signed Monday morning. No one reopened economics with me. So the instruction worked. Who was copied? Halcyon's Deputy General Counsel. Did they object? No. Why? They may have viewed it as a drafting instruction within previously discussed parameters. Or they may have assumed I would review the final document. Which technically I should have. Again, the first life Mason had signed. That mattered. Even if other people rushed. Even if disclosure was incomplete. I still put my name down. This life's salvation was not that everyone else suddenly became honest. It was that I stopped signing what I did not fully understand. Julia said. There's more. I looked up. Elliot attached a balance sheet summary. Mine? Yes. My stomach tightened. He had listed. Personal securities. Estimated property equity. Expected Reed Capital annual distributions. Approximate liquidity. The kind of information Breyer would use to evaluate a guarantor. I stared at it. Where did he get this? That is the issue. Some numbers were public or inferable. Property records. Business holdings. Others were not. My expected annual Reed Capital distributions were private. So were 2 investment account ranges. Only a few people had access. Julia. Our accountant. Me. And Vivian. I said her name without thinking. Vivian. Julia did not respond immediately. She had access to some household financial summaries. Yes. Enough to provide this? Yes. Does that prove she gave it to Elliot? No. Exactly. Not yet. But the possibility changed the situation again. This was no longer simply, my wife asked me to sign a loan. Someone inside Halcyon had prepared my financial capacity in advance. Expanded the collateral language. Told the bank I had confirmed. All before I actually signed. They had built the closing around the assumption that my consent was inevitable. That evening, Vivian came home before me. When I entered, she was sitting at the dining table. No laptop. No phone. Just the printed audit letter. I took off my coat. What happened? They suspended Elliot. I heard. You knew before I did? Julia heard from audit counsel. She laughed bitterly. Of course. I remained standing. Vivian looked at me. They're saying I failed to supervise the financing process. Did you? Her eyes sharpened. I was trying to close an acquisition. That wasn't the question. She looked down. Then. I pushed too hard. There it was. Not full accountability. Closer. I thought if we lost the target, Halcyon would stall for years. So you rushed. Yes. You used the aggressive model. Yes. You didn't show me Daniel's downside case because you thought I would refuse. She closed her eyes. Yes. That answer came quieter than before. Then I placed Elliot's collateral instruction on the table. Her face changed. What is that? You tell me. She read it. Once. Then again. Color drained from her face. I didn't say this. I watched her carefully. Which part? I never told Elliot not to reopen economics with you. Did you ask for broader sponsor support? Silence. Vivian. I told him the bank wanted stronger support. That's not the same thing. I know. Did you give him my financial information? Her eyes came up. And there it was. Not confusion. Recognition. My chest tightened. How much? She looked away. Mason. How much did you give him? I sent him the household net worth summary. I stared at her. The room seemed suddenly very quiet. Why? The bank needed to understand the support package. The bank could have asked me. You were busy. I almost laughed. Busy? We were trying to close. So you gave your secretary my private financial information without asking me. He was coordinating the financing. That does not answer the consent problem. Her eyes filled. I thought you were going to sign. Again. Always that. She thought. Therefore permission. She expected. Therefore authorization. I looked at the woman I had married 8 years ago. She did not look evil. She looked exhausted. Scared. And still convinced, somewhere deep down, that intent mattered more than the boundary she crossed. I said. You didn't just ask me for help. She said nothing. You prepared to use my help before I agreed. Her face broke. Mason, I never meant to hurt you. The first life sentence. Almost exactly. I felt nothing dramatic. Just clarity. I believe you. She looked surprised. Then hopeful. Too hopeful. I continued. That is not enough anymore. The hope disappeared. Because finally, she understood. I was no longer asking whether Vivian intended to destroy me. She hadn't. That was not what happened. She intended to save Halcyon. And in her mind, my money, my assets, my privacy, and my signature were acceptable things to put at risk for that goal. That was the real betrayal. Not hatred. Entitlement. She loved me. She just believed my boundaries mattered less than her company. I walked toward the bedroom. Behind me, she whispered. What happens to us now? I stopped. In my first life, I had died after the company failed. This time, I was alive before the marriage did. I looked back at her. That depends on whether you still think the problem is that I refused to sign. She said nothing. And that silence told me the marriage was much closer to its covenant breach than Halcyon's loan had ever been. Vivian slept in the guest room that night. Neither of us discussed it. At 6 the next morning, I found her already gone. No note. No message. Just an untouched coffee cup beside the sink. 8 years of marriage had reached the stage where silence was easier than breakfast. I should have felt devastated. Instead, I felt something closer to relief. Not because I wanted the marriage to end. Because for 4 days, I had been trying to understand whether Vivian had been misled, manipulated, rushed, or simply careless. Now I knew enough. She had seen the conservative model. She had known Daniel objected. She had withheld that information from me because she thought I might refuse the guarantee. She had given Elliot my private financial information because she assumed I would eventually sign. None of that meant she intended to ruin me. That was the uncomfortable truth. The first life had taught me to think in villains. Vivian was the wife who destroyed me. Elliot was the secretary who took my place. But the evidence in this life was showing something more ordinary and more dangerous. Vivian believed Halcyon's survival justified using every resource available to her, including me. And Elliot believed helping Vivian justified crossing whatever boundary she placed in front of him. The question was no longer whether they had planned my destruction. They hadn't. The question was why, when risk appeared, both of them kept assuming I should carry the largest part of it. That answer came at 8:14. Daniel Cho called. "Mason. You sound tired." "I haven't slept." "What happened?" "Breyer wants an amendment." I sat down. "To the facility?" "Yes." "What kind?" The audit findings triggered a representation review. That made sense. The bank had advanced $42 million based partly on management forecasts now under scrutiny. "What do they want?" "Updated disclosures. Revised covenant calculations. And temporary retention of the additional collateral package." "Vivian's shares?" "Yes." "And Elliot's guarantee?" A pause. "Yes." Something in his voice changed. "What?" "Elliot wants out." I almost smiled. "Already?" "He says the assumptions underlying his guarantee changed after the audit review." "They didn't change." "I know. The assumptions were questioned." "Yes. Which is exactly the risk a guarantor signs for." Daniel exhaled. "You understand why I called?" "Not yet." "Vivian wants the bank to substitute you back in." I went very still. There it was. Round 2. Same debt. Same marriage. Same assumption. Only now Elliot had actually signed. "What did you tell her?" "That I'm not discussing guarantor substitutions outside counsel." "Good." She was not pleased. "I imagine." Daniel hesitated. "Mason, I'm going to say something I probably shouldn't." "Then don't." "I think you need to hear it." I waited. "Elliot is threatening to resign unless Vivian gets him released." That surprised me. Not because I thought Elliot was brave. Because his entire value inside Halcyon came from proximity to Vivian. He had spent years becoming indispensable. Walking away now meant giving that up. Unless the guarantee scared him more than losing her did. How exposed is he really? $5 million maximum principal support, subject to the agreement. I know the number. I mean personally. Daniel lowered his voice. He disclosed about $6.3 million in liquid and marketable assets. So $5 million was not symbolic. It could wipe out most of what he had. No wonder his confidence had disappeared. I thought of him telling me the original structure was routine. Temporary. Well supported. Safe enough. Easy words with someone else's assets underneath them. Did he understand the downside model when he signed? Yes. That mattered. He had already seen Daniel's case. "I am Daniel." Despite myself, I laughed. "Sorry. It's been a long week." "Did you show him?" 3 months ago." My smile vanished. "What?" Daniel continued. "Elliot was involved in every financing meeting. He knew exactly what the covenant downside looked like before Monday. That changed the picture. When Elliot signed $5 million, he had not been fooled by his own optimistic model. He knew the conservative one. He simply assumed the deal would work anyway. Or he assumed Vivian would protect him before the downside arrived. Just as she had expected me to protect her. The same structure. Different direction. What happens if he resigns? Operational pain. Fatal? No. Then let him resign. Daniel was quiet. "You really are done saving people?" "No." I looked at the morning light across my desk. "I'm done confusing rescue with obligation." At 10, Julia and I met with Breyer Federal. Rachel Sloan brought bank counsel. No Vivian. No Elliot. This meeting concerned one thing only. Whether Breyer expected any support from me after my refusal. Rachel opened directly. "For the record, the bank understands you did not execute any guarantee." "Correct." "You have no obligation under the closed facility." "Correct." "Halcyon has asked whether you would consider replacing some or all of Mr. Mercer's support if the credit committee revises terms." "No." Rachel nodded once. No surprise. No persuasion. Understood. Bank counsel asked. "Would Reed Capital consider an arm's-length investment into Halcyon?" "No." That surprised Julia. She looked at me. I continued. Not under the current governance conditions. Rachel wrote something down. If those conditions changed, I'd evaluate it like any other investment. No family discount. No husband discount. No emergency exception. The answer felt clean. Rachel closed her folder. There is one additional issue. What? The original sponsor capacity package. My expression hardened. What about it? We now understand some financial information was provided without your direct authorization. Yes. The bank did not know that at the time. I understand. We're documenting correction of the source. Good. Then Rachel said something unexpected. Mr. Reed, you should also know that the bank's original requested support was lower. I stared at her. What? Julia leaned forward. Explain. Rachel pulled out the early credit memorandum. Breyer initially proposed a $10 million limited guarantee from Mason, plus stronger company collateral. I looked at the page. Then why did it become 22? Halcyon pushed to preserve operating flexibility and reduce pledged corporate assets. My pulse changed. Who proposed increasing my support? Rachel checked the record. Halcyon's financing team. Who specifically? Elliot Mercer was the primary contact. There it was. Julia asked. Did Vivian approve the revised structure? Yes. My jaw tightened. The First Life suddenly rearranged itself again. I had always believed Breyer Federal demanded the enormous guarantee because Halcyon was risky. Not exactly. The bank wanted support. But Halcyon had negotiated where that support would come from. And Vivian's team chose me. My assets. My collateral. My exposure. Why? To keep more of Halcyon's own assets free. To protect Vivian's control. The bank had not forced that choice. She had. Rachel slid the memorandum toward us. The $10 million structure was discussed approximately 6 weeks before closing. Was I told? I can only speak to bank communications. We did not communicate directly with you at that stage. Because Elliot controlled the channel. Again. I asked. What did Halcyon say when Breyer proposed more corporate collateral? Rachel read from the notes. Management preferred sponsor support to avoid constraints on post-acquisition operating flexibility. Sponsor. Me. The word made my marriage sound like a financing category. Julia asked. Did the bank understand Mason was part of Halcyon management? No. Board member? No. Shareholder? Indirectly through marital economic exposure perhaps, but not a controlling company holder. Yet management proposed placing more personal risk on him than on the company's own executives. Rachel did not answer. She did not need to. That was not the bank's moral problem. It was ours. Vivian came to Reed Capital at noon. No appointment. Nora told her I was in a meeting. Vivian said she would wait. She waited 47 minutes. That alone told me how serious things had become. When I finally let her in, she looked nothing like the polished CEO from a week ago. She had barely slept. Mason. Vivian. Breyer talked to you. Yes. Her eyes closed briefly. Rachel wasn't supposed to make this personal. She didn't. I placed the early credit memorandum on the desk. You did. Vivian saw the 10 million number. Her face changed. How did you get that? Breyer. Mason. The bank originally asked for 10. Silence. You and Elliot increased my exposure to 22 so Halcyon could keep more of its assets unencumbered. That's not exactly what happened. Then explain it. She sat down. For once, she did not begin with anger. The acquisition required flexibility after closing. That explains why you wanted fewer company restrictions. Yes. Not why I should carry the difference. We were married. Again. That answer. She must have heard how weak it sounded now because she immediately continued. I thought our interests were aligned. They weren't. They were. No. I shook my head. If Halcyon succeeded, you kept control of a larger company. You benefited too. Indirectly. You were my husband. And if Halcyon failed, Breyer could pursue me personally. Her voice softened. I never expected that. That's the part you still don't understand. I leaned forward. You didn't need to expect failure. Her eyes met mine. You only needed to respect that I was the one exposed to it. Silence. Then I asked. Why is Elliot trying to get out of his guarantee? She looked away. So Daniel had been right. He's nervous. About the same loan he told me was safe? The audit changed things. No. The audit revealed things. She said nothing. Is he resigning? Vivian's expression hardened. He threatened to. And? I told him not to. Why? He's important to Halcyon. I looked at her. That's all? Her face changed. There. Small. But visible. I knew that expression. I had seen it in the first life after the affair came out. Not guilt exactly. Attachment. Protectiveness. I asked quietly. How long? Vivian froze. She knew immediately what I meant. That answered half the question. Mason. How long have you been sleeping with him? Her face drained. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then she whispered. 4 months. My stomach dropped. Not 9 months. My first life estimate had been wrong. But the affair was real. Current. Present. No future memory required anymore. Before the loan negotiations? Yes. Before he proposed increasing my guarantee? Her eyes filled. Yes. I looked away. Not because the affair surprised me. Because suddenly the financial choices had a new dimension. Elliot was not just Vivian's secretary. He was her lover. She had allowed the man sleeping with her to negotiate how much of her husband's wealth would stand behind her company. And she had never thought that conflict mattered enough to tell me. Did the board know? No. Breyer? No. Daniel? No. Your counsel? No. So Elliot negotiated sponsor support from me while secretly involved with you. She started crying. It wasn't like that. I looked at her. Then what was it like? He didn't control me. I didn't say he did. I made the financing decisions. That was supposed to protect her. Instead, it made things worse. You approved the higher guarantee. Yes. You withheld Daniel's downside model. Her eyes closed. Yes. You gave Elliot my financial information. Yes. And you were sleeping with him. She covered her face. Yes. There it was. The truth. No giant hidden conspiracy. Something Messier. Vivian made the decisions. Elliot helped execute them. Their affair created a conflict neither disclosed. And both assumed my consent would arrive because historically, it always had. I stood. Vivian looked up. What are you doing? Calling Julia. Why? I'm filing for divorce. Her face went completely still. Mason. No. She stood too. Don't decide this while you're angry. I'm not angry. That frightened her more. You can't end 8 years over one mistake. I stared at her. One? She flinched. Good. Because the affair was not the only issue. The loan was not the only issue. The withheld model was not the only issue. The private financial disclosure was not the only issue. The pattern was the issue. You made me the safest person to sacrifice. Her tears fell. That's not true. It is. No. When the company needed collateral, mine was easier than yours. She shook her head. When the bank needed confidence, my balance sheet was easier than reducing the deal. Mason. When the downside model threatened my signature, withholding it was easier than risking my refusal. She covered her mouth. And when your marriage became inconvenient? I looked toward the door. You found someone who made your decisions feel justified. She cried harder. I love you. I believed her. That was the terrible part. I know. Her face collapsed. Then why? Because you loved me and still thought my consent was optional. Silence. That was the end. Not legally. Not yet. But the marriage ended in that room. By 4, Julia had started preparing the divorce filing and financial preservation notices. Nothing theatrical. No asset freezing beyond lawful protections. No revenge. Just separation. Halcyon belonged to Vivian subject to whatever marital property rules applied. Reed Capital's premarital and inherited structures had extensive documentation. The rest would be handled properly. At 5:12, Daniel called again. This time his voice sounded almost disbelieving. You won't believe what happened. What? Elliot formally resigned. I looked toward the empty chair where Vivian had sat. Effective when? Immediately. And the guarantee? Daniel paused. That's the problem. What? His resignation does not release it. Of course it didn't. A personal guarantee was not an employment benefit. Elliot could leave Halcyon. He could stop answering Vivian's calls. He could move across the country. Unless Breyer agreed otherwise, his signature remained. What's Vivian doing? Trying to get the bank to release him. Why? Daniel was quiet. Then, I think you already know. Yes. I did. For the first time, Vivian was fighting to protect the man who had signed the debt in my place. And the irony was almost unbearable. In my first life, when the bank came after me, she told me Halcyon could not survive if she shifted company assets to protect me. This time, before Breyer had collected $1 from Elliot, she was already searching for ways to reduce his exposure. That was not yet proof of how far she would go. But I knew what I would do. Nothing. I would not interfere. I would not ask the bank to punish him. I would not block a lawful restructuring. I would not manipulate the company into failure. I would simply refuse to become his replacement. At 5:43, an email arrived from Vivian. One sentence. Please sign the original guarantee temporarily so Breyer will release Elliot while we restructure. I stared at the screen. Then laughed. Not loudly. Not bitterly. Just once. Because after everything she had finally admitted, she was still asking the same question. Would Mason carry the risk? For her company. For her secretary. For the man sleeping with his wife. I typed 4 words. No. He signed it. Then I closed the laptop. This time, when the $50 million loan began to crack, everyone's signature was exactly where it belonged. And mine was nowhere on the page. Vivian sent the same request 3 more times. Different words. Same meaning. Breyer only needs temporary support. This would give Halcyon time to refinance. You wouldn't actually lose anything if we closed the amendment quickly. That last one almost made me laugh. It was the language of my first life all over again. Temporary. Safe. Unlikely to be called. Exactly the phrases people used when they wanted someone else to take risks seriously enough to sign, but not seriously enough to refuse. I did not answer. Julia did. She sent Vivian's counsel 1 paragraph. Mason Reed will not assume, replace, backstop, or otherwise guarantee any obligation of Halcyon Therapeutics or Elliot Mercer. No anger. No moral speech. No mention of the affair. Just a boundary in writing. This time, nobody would be able to say later that I had agreed, in principle. The divorce filing went out the next morning. Vivian received it at Halcyon. I knew because she called me at 9:06. Mason. Yes? You filed. Yes. So that's it? No. A pause. What do you mean? It means the legal process starts. Her voice shook. You really can talk about our marriage like a filing now? I looked at the documents on my desk. 8 years. A home. Shared holidays. Her first product launch. My father's funeral. Late-night takeout. Arguments. Plans. Trust. No, it was not just a filing. But the law needed paperwork even when emotions were complicated. Yes. She became quiet. Then. I told Elliot we were done. That surprised me. What? The affair. I said nothing. I ended it. Okay. Her breathing changed. That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say? I don't know. That it changes everything? Silence. Vivian, ending the affair now doesn't change what happened. I know. Does it change the loan? No. The model? No. My financial information? No. Another silence. Then she whispered. I'm trying. I believe that too. The problem was not whether Vivian could try. The problem was what she expected trying to purchase. Forgiveness? Time? A reversed filing? A husband available again if she demonstrated enough regret? I did not know. And for once, I did not need to know immediately. Halcyon's problem became more serious on Wednesday. Not because the bank accelerated the loan. It didn't. Not because the acquisition failed overnight. It didn't. Because the target's largest distributor formally revised its purchase forecast downward. The same distributor whose non-binding volume Elliot had treated as nearly committed. The revised forecast reduced expected first-year orders by 31%. Not fatal. But enough to make Daniel's conservative model look increasingly realistic. Breyer's credit committee reacted exactly as a bank should. It requested updated covenant projections. Additional monthly reporting. A restriction on certain discretionary payments. And no release of Elliot's guarantee. Vivian called the demand punitive. Daniel called it predictable. I agreed with Daniel. quietly. From a distance. Because Halcyon's survival was no longer my project. That distinction felt unnatural. For 8 years, every time Vivian faced a crisis, I stepped in. When a supplier threatened litigation, I found a restructuring lawyer. When a lease problem delayed the first lab, Reed Capital guaranteed the landlord. When a prototype run went over budget, I advanced money through a documented note. When her first major investor backed out, I introduced 2 family office contacts. I had never viewed those things as sacrifices. That was what marriage meant to me. But somewhere along the way, Vivian stopped seeing help as voluntary. It became infrastructure. And infrastructure was only noticed when it disappeared. At noon, Elliot called. Not Vivian. Elliot. I stared at the number for several seconds before answering. Mason. What? I need 5 minutes. You already used one. He ignored that. I know you hate me. No. That seemed to throw him. You should. I don't need to. He laughed bitterly. Fine. Whatever. What do you want? I want to buy back my guarantee. I almost smiled. That's between you and Briar. I know. So why call me? Because Vivian keeps trying to substitute you. There it was. Direct. Current. No hidden memory. She told you that? She doesn't have to. His voice tightened. I've seen the amendment drafts. Interesting. He had resigned from Halcyon. Yet he still had access to communications through his counsel or as guarantor. What are you asking me to do? Refuse. I already did. No. He exhaled. I mean publicly. Formally. Tell Briar you will never substitute. My counsel already did. Silence. You did? Yes. He sounded relieved. That irritated me more than anger would have. You're welcome. I didn't ask for sarcasm. You called the husband of the woman you were sleeping with because you want assurance he won't take your debt. He said nothing. Do you hear how strange that is? After several seconds. Yes. Good. At least we were making progress. Then he said. Mason, the 5 million could wipe me out. There it was. The fear. Real this time. I looked at the city outside my office. I know. You know? Daniel told me roughly how exposed you are. And you still think this is fair? I almost laughed. Fair? You didn't sign. That was my choice. I did. That was yours. Vivian pressured me. I closed my eyes. The sentence mattered. How? She said if I believed in her, I'd stand behind the deal. There it was. The same tactic. Different man. Different relationship. Same structure. You could have said no. You did. Yes. He went quiet. Then. I thought she'd protect me. That sentence landed harder than I expected. Not because I felt sympathy. Because it mirrored my first life perfectly. I thought Vivian would protect me. I thought marriage guaranteed it. Elliot thought intimacy guaranteed it. Both of us had believed being loved by Vivian meant she would stop before the cost became too high. But Halcyon always came first. I said. She may still try. Not enough. His voice cracked slightly. Briar won't release me unless someone stronger replaces the support or the company improves. Then you have your answer. What? You signed a real obligation. He became angry again. I know that. No. I paused. You knew the words. Now you know the meaning. Silence. Then Elliot said something I did not expect. You were smarter than me. No. You walked. I had information you didn't think mattered. He laughed. What information? That people telling me something was safe were unwilling to carry the same risk. He said nothing. That was enough. 3 days later, Halcyon's audit committee issued final internal findings. Not public. But Julia received the portions relevant to my financial disclosures and divorce because my personal information had been involved. The findings did not accuse Vivian or Elliot of criminal fraud. That mattered. Instead, they described a series of governance failures. Management presented an aggressive acquisition model without adequately distinguishing it from finance's base case. Daniel's objections were insufficiently documented in the board materials. Elliot inaccurately represented my guarantee as confirmed before I executed anything. My personal financial information was shared without proper authorization. A material conflict existed because Vivian and Elliot were in a secret intimate relationship while he was coordinating financing decisions affecting both the company and me. The audit committee called that conflict undisclosed and unacceptable. That phrase did more damage inside Halcyon than any accusation I could have made. Vivian remained CEO. Barely. The board imposed conditions. Independent oversight of the acquisition integration. Removal of Vivian from unilateral control over financing amendments above a set threshold. Mandatory disclosure of executive conflicts. A temporary reduction in certain discretionary compensation. And a formal board reprimand. Not dramatic enough for the internet. Very real for a CEO. Elliott's resignation remained final. The board reserved civil claims relating to costs caused by misstatements and financing disruptions. Again. Process. No instant ruin. No fantasy. Just consequences attaching themselves to decisions. My father-in-law called 2 days later. Warren Langford. Vivian's father. He had never liked me much. Not because I had done anything wrong. Because he believed Vivian marrying a financially secure man made her less hungry. He once told her, "Comfort kills founders." Vivian repeated it to me like it was wisdom. I thought it was stupid then. I thought it was cruel now. Warren said, "You're really divorcing her." Yes. She made a mistake. Several. You know what I mean. I leaned back. No. I don't think I do anymore. He exhaled sharply. She built Halcyon from nothing. That's true. You know what people do under pressure. That doesn't excuse everything. Did she steal money from you? No. Did she forge your signature? No. Did she force you to sign? No. He thought he was making his case. Instead, he made mine. She didn't need to force me. Silence. She believed I would say yes because I always had. Warren did not respond. I continued. She withheld information because she thought I might refuse. She was trying to protect the deal. Yes. That's what CEOs do. No. I shook my head. That's what bad spouses do. That stopped him. Company behavior and marriage behavior were not the same. Vivian had spent years letting the CEO role justify decisions inside our relationship. Eventually, every boundary became negotiable if Halcyon benefited. Warren said, "She loves you." I know. You don't sound like you believe it. I do. Then why leave? Because love isn't the only requirement. He laughed bitterly. That sounds like therapy. No. It sounds like accounting. That made me smile. Maybe. Marriage had assets. Liabilities. Commitments. Not financial ones. Trust. Consent. Reliability. When those broke, declaring the relationship solvent did not fix anything. Vivian came to the house Sunday evening. Our house. Technically still both of ours until the divorce resolved possession and property issues. She texted first. "Can I pick up clothes?" I said yes. She arrived alone. For 20 minutes, we barely spoke. She packed dresses, shoes, documents, books. Then she stopped in the bedroom doorway holding a photograph. Our wedding day. She looked at it. Then at me. "Were you ever happy?" The question irritated me. Yes. She looked surprised. "Really? Of course. How can you say that after everything? Because everything before this doesn't become fake just because the ending is bad." Her eyes filled. That answer seemed to hurt more than if I had said no. Maybe because it left her no simple defense. If the marriage had always been broken, then what happened was inevitable. But it wasn't. We had something real. She damaged something real. That was harder to live with. She sat on the edge of the bed. "I keep thinking about Monday." "The signing?" "Yes." "What about it? If you had signed." She stopped. My body went cold. Not fear. Recognition. "Go on." She looked at the photograph. None of this would have happened. There it was again. Still. After the audit. After the affair came out. After the board reprimand. After the divorce filing. A part of her still believed my refusal created the disaster. I said, "If I had signed, the model would still have been aggressive." She closed her eyes. "The distributor would still have cut volume. Nothing. You and Elliott would still have had an affair." She flinched. "My information would still have been shared without permission." Silence. "The only difference is that I would have been financially trapped inside all of it." Her tears began falling. "I know. No." I shook my head. "You're starting to." That was different. She looked at me. "Is there anything I can do?" There was the question. Not to save Halcyon. Not to save Elliot. To save us. I thought carefully. Yes. Hope appeared immediately. Too quickly. What? Stop trying to reverse the consequence before you understand the choice. Her face fell. I don't understand. Every time something hurts, your first instinct is to fix the outcome. I sat across from her. The loan becomes dangerous? Replace the guarantor. Elliot wants out? Put me back in. The marriage breaks? End the affair and ask me to stay. Her eyes dropped. You keep treating consequences like engineering problems. I paused. But some things aren't problems to solve. What are they? Things you have to live through. For the first time, she did not argue. The next major break came Monday afternoon. Daniel called Julia. Not me. Julia called me afterward. Halcyon's revised covenant model is complete. And? They can remain compliant. I sat straighter. Without new support? For now. That surprised me. How? They're reducing acquisition spending, delaying part of integration, suspending a planned expansion, and selling a non-core product line. Painful. Yes. Possible? Yes. Then Breyer doesn't need me. No. What about Elliot? Julia paused. His guarantee remains until the release conditions are met. How long? Potentially several quarters. There it was. No immediate catastrophe. No magical collection notice. Just time. Risk. The thing he had volunteered to carry. The thing I had refused. What's Vivian doing? Accepting the restructuring. That surprised me more. No fight? I'm sure there was a fight. I almost smiled. But she signed the amendment. Good. For the first time, Vivian had chosen the company's own pain over transferring the risk back to me. Late. But real. That night, she sent one message. I signed Breyer's restructuring. I didn't ask them to replace Elliot with you. I stared at it. Then replied. Good. A minute later. That's all? I thought about saying more. Then I realized she did not need praise for respecting a boundary she should never have crossed. So I answered. That's how it should have been from the beginning. No response came. I put the phone down. For the first time since I woke up reborn, I felt the story narrowing. The loan was no longer expanding into new mysteries. The central truth was already visible. Vivian had built a financing structure around my willingness to absorb risk. Elliot helped because he believed in her, and because he believed I would sign. When I refused, the risk moved to him. Then the facts surfaced. Now both of them were learning what I had learned too late in my first life. A signature did not mean trust. It meant liability. And this time, everyone who chose the risk was finally living with their own name beneath it. 3 months passed before Breyer Federal tested the new restructuring. By then, Halcyon had sold the non-core product line, cut 2 expansion projects, reduced acquisition hiring, and missed its original growth plan by enough that nobody inside the company could pretend Daniel's conservative model had been pessimistic. He had been close. Painfully close. The good news was Halcyon was still operating. The bad news was that operating no longer meant comfortable. Every dollar mattered now. Every covenant mattered. And every signature attached to the financing package mattered most of all. Including Elliot's. My divorce from Vivian was moving more slowly than the loan. That felt appropriate. Businesses could amend debt agreements in weeks. 8 years of marriage took longer to unwind. We had no children. That simplified some things. Property was harder. Vivian owned a large block of Halcyon founder stock acquired during the marriage. Reed Capital had assets I brought in before we married, plus inherited interests from my father that were extensively documented. There were also jointly acquired investment accounts, the house, retirement contributions, and ordinary marital assets. Nothing was going to disappear because one spouse cheated. Nothing was going to automatically become mine because Vivian hurt me. Julia made that clear from the beginning. The divorce court is not a morality scoreboard. I know. Good. She looked over the latest settlement proposal. Because your strongest position is also the cleanest one. What's that? You want the financial separation documented correctly. You don't want revenge. That was true. I did not want Halcyon stock at a discount because Vivian was under pressure. I did not want to force a sale that hurt the company. And I certainly did not want a legal battle whose only purpose was making her suffer. I had already lived one life where her company consumed mine. I was not giving it another. Vivian had changed too. Not enough to undo anything. Enough that I noticed. She stopped calling me every time Halcyon hit a problem. She stopped asking whether Reed Capital might invest. She stopped sending explanations of what Elliot had done. And she stopped insisting that the marriage could still be saved if I just gave her enough time. The first month, she fought the divorce. The second, she delayed. By the third, she began negotiating. That was the first real sign she understood. Not acceptance of losing me. Acceptance that my answer mattered. There was a difference. Elliot, meanwhile, had disappeared from Vivian's daily life. He was no longer at Halcyon. The affair was over. But his guarantee remained. Breyer had refused every attempt to release it early. Not vindicatively. The credit committee simply looked at the numbers and said, no. Halcyon's leverage remained above the release threshold. The delayed $8 million draw was still unavailable. And the company's forecast was weaker than it had been when Elliot signed. The bank was not going to surrender support because the guarantor regretted becoming one. That was not how contracts worked. I knew that better than anyone. The call came on a Thursday morning. Julia walked into my office without knocking. That was unusual. What happened? Breyer issued a default notice. I stood immediately. To Halcyon? Yes. My first thought was not satisfaction. It was fear. Old fear. The first life flooding back. Foreclosure. Demand letters. Asset schedules. Lawyers asking what I owned. I had to remind myself. Not mine. Not this time. What default? Financial covenant. Which one? Leverage ratio. I closed my eyes. Of course. Material? Enough that Breyer is exercising amendment rights, but they haven't accelerated the entire facility. So this is curable? Possibly. I sat back down. What do they want? Additional principal paydown, tighter reporting, increased pricing, and continuation of all existing guarantor support. Elliot. Yes. My chest tightened. There it was. The moment I had died financially in the first life. Not exactly the same date. Not the same restructuring. But close enough. The loan had finally reached the point where the bank cared less about projections and more about contractual remedies. Julia watched me. You okay? Yes. You don't look okay. I've seen this before. She frowned. Not literally. Not in this life. I corrected. I've seen enough distressed loans to know what comes next. Better. She nodded. Vivian's counsel requested a meeting. With us? Yes. Why? She wants to discuss the divorce settlement and the Halcyon restructuring together. No. Julia almost smiled. That was also my answer. Good. Separate issues. Separate contracts. Separate consequences. That boundary had become the central lesson of this life. Vivian came to my office anyway. Not unannounced. She requested 15 minutes. I agreed. She walked in carrying no documents. No laptop. No company folder. Just herself. That was new. I heard Breyer issued the notice, I said. Yes. Can Halcyon cure it? We think so. We? Daniel and the board. Not Elliot. Good. How? Asset sale proceeds, cost cuts, and a negotiated principal reduction. Painful. Yes. Possible? Yes. She sat across from me. Then said. But Breyer is insisting Elliot remain on the guarantee. I waited. She looked at me. I'm not asking you to replace him. That mattered. 3 months ago, that would have been her first request. Okay. I wanted you to know. Why? Her eyes dropped. Because I finally understand why you said no. I said nothing. She continued. When you refused, I thought you were abandoning me. A small laugh. Then Elliot signed. Her expression changed. And the first time the loan became uncomfortable, he wanted out. I remembered his call. 5 million could wipe me out. Same fear. Same contract. Vivian said. I was angry at him. Why? Because he knew the risk. So did I. She looked at me. Yes. That one word carried more than an apology. I realized I was judging him for the exact thing I expected you to do. My breathing slowed. What? Carry something dangerous because I asked. There it was. Finally. No board language. No financing language. No acquisition language. Just the relationship. Vivian looked down. When you refused, I thought you had changed. She swallowed. You had. A pause. But not the way I thought. I waited. You stopped letting me define love as compliance. The room went quiet. That was probably the most honest thing she had ever said to me. I did not reward it with reconciliation. Truth deserved respect. Not automatic restoration. You're right. Her eyes filled. I know that doesn't fix us. No. I know. And this time, she really did. Breyer's amendment meeting occurred the following Monday. I was not supposed to attend. Then Elliot's counsel requested that I be present. That surprised me. Julia asked why. The answer came in writing. Elliot intended to argue that his guarantee had been induced in part by management's failure to disclose the same downside information previously withheld from me. Interesting. Not necessarily strong. But not absurd. He had known Daniel's downside model. That weakened his argument. Still, his counsel wanted a clear record regarding how the guarantor substitutions had happened. Breyer agreed to a limited meeting. So I attended. Not as participant in the debt. As a factual witness. That distinction mattered. Rachel Sloane sat at the center. Bank counsel beside her. Vivian and Daniel on one side. Elliot and his attorney on the other. Julia and I at the end. For the first time, all the important people were in one room. No dramatic audience. No reporters. Just paper. Contracts. And the consequences of who signed what. Rachel began. Breyer's position is straightforward. Always a good sign. Halcyon is in covenant default. No one argued. The bank is willing to forbear from acceleration if the amendment conditions are met. She listed them. Principal paydown. Additional reporting. Higher pricing. Suspension of certain distributions. No additional acquisitions. And continued enforcement of existing guarantees. Elliot's attorney spoke. My client disputes whether continuation of his guarantee is equitable given material changes in the company's financial condition. Rachel answered. The guarantee expressly contemplates deterioration. There it was. Simple. His lawyer continued. He signed based on management representations. Rachel looked toward Vivian. Then Daniel. That is a dispute between your client and other parties unless it affects enforceability. Elliot finally spoke. I was told the facility would be temporary. My entire body went still. The exact phrase. The same one he had used on me. Rachel looked at him. The loan is not temporary. He corrected quickly. I mean my guarantee. Rachel opened the document. The release conditions are stated here. He said nothing. You were represented by counsel. Yes. You reviewed the agreement? Yes. You signed voluntarily? His jaw tightened. Yes. That was the moment. No revenge could have improved it. Not because he was suffering. Because the truth had become symmetrical. He once told me. It's routine. It burns off. The operating plan has cushion. Now he sat in front of the same bank discovering those phrases did not replace contract language. Rachel turned to me. Mr. Reed, for the record, did you ever agree to substitute for Mr. Mercer after he executed the guarantee? No. Did you authorize Halcyon to represent otherwise? No. Would you consider doing so now? No. One word. Final. The first life ended because I had signed. This life changed because I did not. Then Vivian spoke. I want the record to reflect something. Her counsel looked at her. She continued anyway. Mason did not cause this financing problem. Nobody moved. The company's operating performance and management decisions caused the covenant issue. Her eyes stayed on Rachel. He was asked several times to assume or replace personal support. He refused. Halcyon should not base any restructuring proposal on changing that. Silence. I looked at her. She did not look back. For once, she was not saying something to persuade me. She was saying it because it needed to be part of the record. Rachel nodded. Understood. That mattered more than any private apology. Not enough to restore the marriage. Enough to show she had finally stopped trying to move the burden. The bank approved the amendment 2 days later. Halcyon made a $12 million principal paydown using proceeds from the non-core sale and existing cash reserves. The company accepted tighter covenants. Vivian's founder distributions were restricted until leverage improved. Executive bonuses were suspended. The board retained independent financial oversight. And Elliot's guarantee remained fully effective. No one lost $50 million overnight. No bank seized a mansion. No dramatic collapse. The company simply became smaller, tighter, and more disciplined. The expansion Vivian had wanted so badly was postponed indefinitely. That was the real cost. She had pushed too hard to become bigger. Now survival required becoming smaller. Elliot filed a civil claim several weeks later. Not against me. Against Halcyon and Vivian, alleging misrepresentation and breach of duties connected to the guarantee process. His lawyers did not claim he was innocent of his own decisions. They argued he had been pressured and inadequately informed about certain governance issues. Vivian's lawyers disputed that. Daniel's records showed Elliot knew the conservative model. The case eventually narrowed into a financial dispute rather than some grand conspiracy. I stayed out of it. That was important. Elliot had signed. Vivian had asked. What liability existed between them belonged to them. I no longer needed every person who hurt me to lose everything. I only needed their problems to stop becoming mine. My divorce mediation took place the same month. 6 hours. 2 conference rooms. Stacks of financial schedules. Far less emotional than I expected. At the end, Vivian agreed to a division that respected the premarital structure of Reed Capital while fairly dividing marital assets. I agreed not to seek a forced liquidation of Halcyon stock. She kept the house. I kept my interest in a property we had used as a secondary residence. Joint accounts were divided. No one won. That felt right. Before signing the settlement memorandum, Vivian asked for 5 minutes alone. The mediators agreed. She sat across from me. The same way she had sat across from me the morning of the loan. No silver pen this time. Just black ink. You know what I keep thinking about? What? The first document. I knew. The guarantee. Yes. She looked at my signature line on the divorce settlement. I thought marriage meant you would sign whatever I needed. I did not interrupt. And now we're ending the marriage because I never understood that you were allowed to say no. Her voice broke. I looked down. That's part of it. I know. Then she asked. If I had shown you Daniel's model from the beginning, do you think you would have signed? I thought carefully. Maybe the old Mason would have. Maybe love would still have pushed me into it. Maybe not. The answer no longer mattered. I don't know. She nodded. That's the point, isn't it? Yes. She finally understood. Consent required the possibility of refusal. Otherwise, it was just expectation dressed as partnership. Vivian signed the settlement. Then handed me the pen. I signed mine. For the first time in 2 lives, my signature ended an obligation instead of creating one. 2 weeks later, Breyer sent the first formal guarantor reserve notice to Elliot. Not a demand for the full $5 million. A notice that if Halcyon failed the amended cure schedule, the bank reserved all rights under his guarantee. Julia forwarded it because it had become relevant to nothing I owned. I stared at the attachment for a moment. Then closed it. No satisfaction. No fear. Just distance. In my first life, that kind of letter had destroyed my sleep. This time, it belonged to the man whose name was printed beneath the risk. Exactly where he had put it. And mine was nowhere on the page. Halcyon survived. That surprised some people. It did not surprise Daniel. It was never a bad company, he told me 6 months after the restructuring. It was a company carrying too much ambition at once. That was probably the best description. Vivian had tried to buy growth before the business had earned enough room to absorb failure. The acquisition itself was not worthless. Its products sold. Its engineering team integrated. Several customers stayed. But the revenue ramp arrived later than Elliot's model promised, and the costs looked much closer to Daniel's original forecast. By the end of the second quarter after restructuring, Halcyon was still below the leverage level required to release Elliot's guarantee. That meant one thing. His name stayed on the document. Mine did not. I thought that fact would feel triumphant. It didn't. Mostly, it felt clean. The divorce became final in March. No courthouse confrontation. No reporters. No angry speech outside the building. Vivian and I appeared remotely for the final hearing because both attorneys agreed there was nothing left to contest. The judge confirmed the settlement. Asked whether we understood it. Asked whether we entered voluntarily. We both said yes. Then 8 years of marriage became a closed legal file. Afterward, Vivian texted, "I hope you build something that belongs only to you." I stared at the message for a while. Then answered, "You too." That was all. No hidden invitation. No nostalgia. No promise that maybe years later we would try again. Some relationships ended because love disappeared. Ours ended because love had become mixed with entitlement for too long. Removing the entitlement did not automatically recreate what came before. I had finally accepted that. So had Vivian. Reed Capital changed after the divorce too. Not dramatically. I did not suddenly become a ruthless investor. I did not double the company in 6 months. I simply became more deliberate. Every related party transaction now required independent review. No family guarantee without separate counsel. No temporary support documents signed at closing tables. No private financial information shared through spouses or informal intermediaries. My father had built the firm conservatively. I had nearly lost that discipline once because I thought marriage made process unnecessary. It didn't. If anything, close relationships required better process because affection made people assume too much. That lesson became part of how I ran the company. Not because I stopped trusting people. Because trust worked better when nobody had to guess where the boundaries were. Elliot's civil claim against Halcyon ended quietly. He did not win some enormous judgment. Vivian did not crush him either. The case settled. Halcyon agreed to reimburse certain legal costs and resolve compensation disputes. Elliot withdrew broader allegations he could not fully support. His guarantee remained. That was the part Breyer Federal refused to negotiate away. The bank had already made concessions to Halcyon. It had extended cure periods. Accepted a principal paydown. Modified covenants. Restricted distributions. There was no commercial reason to release valid support simply because the guarantor regretted it. Elliot eventually stopped arguing that the document was unfair. Instead, he focused on reducing the risk. He sold an investment property. Moved part of his portfolio into more liquid assets. Reduced spending. Prepared. Exactly what I had been forced to do in my first life. The difference was timing. I prepared after the bank came for me. He prepared before it did. That might have saved him. 9 months after the restructuring, Halcyon missed one of the amended quarterly targets. Not by much. Enough. Breyer issued a formal notice reserving its rights under the guarantee and required an additional principal reduction. Halcyon could cover most of it. Most. There was still a shortfall. The board had 3 choices. Raise equity at an unfavorable valuation. Sell another asset. Or allow Breyer to seek part of the contractually available guarantor support. Vivian chose a combination. Halcyon sold a small product portfolio. Then Breyer made a limited demand against Elliot. Not $5 million. Not everything. $1.7 million. The first time I saw the number, my chest tightened anyway. Because in my first life, the first demand against me had been $4.2 million. Then another. Then enforcement costs. Then collateral. The first check was never what destroyed me. It was the beginning. But this was not my life anymore. Julia forwarded me the information only because Breyer's release of earlier documentation had once referenced Reed Capital, and she wanted me to see that none of our assets appeared in the demand. I read the letter carefully. Guarantor, Elliot Mercer. Not Mason Reed. No ambiguity. No sponsor shorthand. No marital assumption. His name. His obligation. I closed the file. Then I did something I never expected. I called him. He answered after 4 rings. Mason? Yes. Silence. Why are you calling? I heard about the demand. He laughed bitterly. Of course you did. I'm not calling to gloat. Then why? Good question. I thought about it. Because I know what that letter feels like. He went quiet. For the first time since this began, we were not speaking as husband and lover. Not rival guarantors. Not 2 men standing around Vivian. Just 2 people who had signed, or almost signed, the same kind of risk. I can pay it, he said. I figured. It'll hurt. I know. You probably think I deserve that. No. That surprised him. You don't? I think you signed a contract. He exhaled. That sounds exactly like you. Probably. Another silence. Then he said. I used to think you were weak. I almost laughed. Because I helped Vivian? Yes. Interesting. I thought you were just the rich husband she could keep leaning on. That was honest. Ugly. But honest. And then you said no. Yes. I hated you for it. I know. Because suddenly she looked at me. There it was. Not financially. Personally. She asked you to carry what I wouldn't. Yes. And you thought that meant she chose you. Long silence. Then. Yes. I leaned back. How did that work out? He laughed once. Not happily. About how you'd expect. We both knew. Vivian had not transferred love from one man to another like a prize. She transferred expectation. Elliot mistook being needed for being preferred. I had made the same mistake for years. I said, pay what you owe. Fight anything you don't. Then move on. He was quiet. That advice? Yes. From you? Take it or don't. Another pause. Mason. What? I'm sorry. I did not ask for which part. The affair. The email. The false confirmation. The financing. Maybe all of it. Maybe only what hurt him now. It no longer mattered enough for me to investigate. Okay. I ended the call. Not forgiveness as friendship. Not reconciliation. Just the end of another obligation I had been carrying emotionally without noticing. Vivian heard about the demand the same day. She did not call me. That mattered. Months earlier, she would have. She would have asked whether Reed Capital could bridge the amount. Whether I could buy out part of the guarantee. Whether I could temporarily help until Halcyon recovered. Instead, Daniel told Julia that Vivian sold part of her personal Halcyon stock in a permitted secondary transaction and used some of the proceeds to inject capital into the company. Not enough to release Elliot. Enough to reduce Halcyon's future exposure. She took her own loss. That was new. And maybe that was the clearest evidence she had changed. Not apologizing to me. Not ending the affair. Not accepting the divorce. Paying part of the cost herself without trying to move it onto someone safer. I respected that. From a distance. 1 year after the original signing day, I walked past Halcyon's headquarters for the first time since the divorce. I had a meeting 2 blocks away. The glass tower looked exactly the same. People entering. People leaving. No sign that it had once nearly consumed my entire financial life. I stopped across the street. For a second, I remembered the conference room. The silver pen. Vivian saying, "It's only paperwork." Elliot smiling. My name typed beneath the guarantee. In the first life, I had picked up the pen because I thought saying no would mean I did not believe in my wife. That was the lie beneath everything. Refusal was not betrayal. Questions were not disloyalty. Boundaries were not abandonment. And love did not become more real because one person accepted more risk. The pedestrian light changed. I crossed the street and kept walking. No need to go inside. Nothing there belonged to me anymore. That was the point. Later that afternoon, Julia dropped a small archival box on my desk. What's this? Closed personal exposure files. Inside were copies of the original guarantee drafts. Collateral schedules. The false Sunday confirmation. The aggressive financing model. Divorce documents. Everything. I pulled out the unsigned original guarantee. $22 million maximum personal exposure. My name printed beneath the blank line. I stared at it. Then at the revised package beneath it. Elliot's $5 million guarantee. His signature. A year ago, that contrast had felt like revenge. Now it felt like something more useful. Choice. The first life, I signed because everyone around me made refusal feel impossible. The second life, I discovered impossibility was often just pressure wearing formal clothes. I had moved the pen across the table. Nothing more. I did not forge Elliot's name. I did not trick him. I did not hide the downside model from him. I did not force Vivian to accept an aggressive acquisition. I did not cause the distributor to cut volume. I did not create the covenant breach. I simply refused to place my signature underneath decisions I did not control. The consequences followed the people who made them. Exactly as they should. Halcyon eventually recovered. 2 years later, it refinanced the remaining Briar facility with a smaller loan and stronger equity cushion. The new bank required no personal guarantee from anyone. Elliot's obligation was released after the refinance, after he had already paid the $1.7 million demand and associated costs. He lost money. He did not lose his life. Vivian remained CEO for another year before moving into an executive chair role and hiring an experienced operator to run the company day to day. Daniel became CFO permanently. Halcyon grew again. Slower. Healthier. I was glad. Not because I still belonged there. Because destruction had never been the point. As for me, I never guaranteed another spouse's company loan. That was easy. The harder lesson was broader. I stopped signing emotional contracts too. No more. You're stronger, so you can take it. You have more, so you should risk it. You love me, so you'll say yes. Those sentences had nearly killed me once. This time, I learned that generosity only remained generous when refusal was allowed. The first time, I signed a $50 million loan because my CEO wife told me we were building a future together. When the loan failed, she protected the company. Her secretary protected himself. And I carried the debt alone. Then I died. When I came back, I did not destroy Halcyon. I did not expose some fantasy criminal empire. I did not make the bank punish anyone for me. I just moved the pen. Elliot signed the risk he believed was safe. Vivian kept the company she had chosen to protect. And I kept the one thing I should never have put on the table in the first place. My own life. That's all for today. Remember to subscribe and support us.